illusion that we don't have a crisis. But we have a serious crisis that requires patriotism to resolve. And we are ready ourselves.
That was Azimio leader Raila Odinga earlier in the week speaking to foreign media, talking about the president not wanting talks. Let me come to you, John. We are members of the East African community. We are under the African Union. There's nothing wrong with the president of a country that's part of the East African community coming to Kenya to help us sort out our issues. As of course, and Caleb said it's bad manners and all that, but really, there's nothing wrong.
Protocol is very clear, diplomatic, right? And is the sovereign authority in Kenya is President Ruto, as of now, isn't it? He's the president. Now, a president of a neighboring country, unless, and this is there is agreement and congruence, right, cannot then come in and seek to reconcile the two as a president unless there is buy-in from the president. That is President Ruto. Mm-hmm. Did that happen? And there's a lot of question. Was there initial buy-in? Was there perhaps a retake? But I said, and I will insist, presidents just don't walk in.
Okay.
Presidents just don't walk in, whether they have been invited by Raila or Uhuru or Ruto for that matter. It's only President Ruto who can invite, right? And there must be buy-in and congruence.
Yes.
Now, did this happen? That's another matter.
Yes.
Was Suluhu sent by East African community? But Kenya's buy-in must be. Mm-hmm. Was she sent by SADC, or was she sent by COMESA, or was she sent by the African Union?
Yeah.
But you cannot refuse to accept the diplomatic conventions and protocols about heads of state coming in. Mm-hmm. Okay. To another country.
Yes, yes. There are protocols and are clear and they're systematic, Caleb. Then what are the possible scenarios going forward for us? I mean, hey, people need to sit down and talk at some point. We cannot continue as we have.
I would like to, let's say, yes. Jamil, I would say this. You remember we had, during the unfortunate period, 2007.
Yes.
And indeed, even 2017, and even 1969, you know, and even 1974, when Tom Mboya, or then JM, or then Robert Ouko, for that matter, presidents just don't come in uninvited. They just cannot. That's a no-go area. Was there buy-in? That's, for me, the bigger question is, why are we not hearing either denial that she wasn't here?
Mm-hmm. A clear denial.
A clear denial. Mm-hmm. We haven't heard, so to speak, a statement from Tanzania or the High Commissioner here, for that matter. Mm-hmm. And we must also, and we must make a distinction. President Ruto was in Dar es Salaam for a multilateral meeting.
Yes.
So the issue of whether he was here or he was, that was not part of the agenda. Mm-hmm. When they were having a tete-a-tete, possibly. Okay. Yeah. Possibly.
But it's between presidents. But
it was between presidents.
Yes.
And that in itself is private.
Okay. Yeah, tete-a-tete off record.
Off record, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so yes. Before you go to the issue of escalation.
Yes.
Even when DRC was in the midst of crisis, mm-hmm. when Patrice Lumumba became prime minister for about 6 to 7 days.
Yes.
The Belgians and the Americans were both planning to kill him.
Yes.
But they still used diplomatic means. Mm. The UN came in to try and negotiate peace between Lumumba's forces and the forces of Shombe. Yes.
Shombe, yes.
So somebody has to come extra outside the country. But then my question is, we are in a crisis, but it's the same crisis that recurs every 5 years. The question is, when we begin civil disobedience, what is the end game? And Martin Luther King was very clear when he was advising people like our leaders. Civil disobedience is not about disorder. It's about obeying a higher authority, a higher law, a divine law. So if they did not have an end game plan, if the plan was a negotiate, a handshake, because for me that's what I'm smelling already. It happens every so often that we have elections, the denial, street wars, people die, then somebody comes and negotiates. We shake hands, you form a coalition. And it's a very dirty way of running a nation. It happened in 2007. It was bloody. We didn't have to kill each other that way because of power. Then 2017 again, people have to die. Every election, people have to die.
Yes.
Then you have to shake hands.
Yes.
Then somebody comes from abroad to come and negotiate. I think we need to rethink either an overhaul system. I don't know how that will happen, or our politicians, we must put them to account, because the first it was issues about elections results.
Yes.
We say we don't recognize. Although we had a promise that whatever Supreme Court makes rules, we shall respect it. Then came the issue of the IEBC, its constitution. Now came the issue of price of food. Unfortunately, it's a global phenomenon. Even in Europe, people are rioting because of food prices and fuel prices. So I may not like Ruto, but you can't blame him completely because of food prices.
Yes.
So there must be, we must tell our leaders that I think you need to look for another formula. Like I think the provost of SCK told the opposition that they need to change the strategy, because one death is too much.
One death is too much. In fact, up to date, we don't really have the exact number of people who have died in the maandamanos. We hear 30, we hear 50, but people have died and others are in hospital. Maybe you can start looking at the cutaways of the vigils that were held across the country yesterday for those who've died and for those who have been injured. We've had a week of relative peace. No maandamanos this week. Of course, we're doing the vigils and the prayer. Maybe now we can talk about an issue that really has been discussed quite a bit since the maandamanos started, and that is police brutality. Caleb and John, I'll come to you in a moment, but first let's listen to what the Law Society of Kenya said about police brutality and religious leaders, and then we'll continue with this discussion.
Not even a year or so down the line of this administration, we are witnessing scenes that are reminiscent of the days when we had one party rule in this country. And we want to say that the country has made a lot of progress to advance politically.
All right, that is LSK chair speaking about police brutality. Gituku, there have been instances when recently that the government and the president and those in government have said that, well, police need to be allowed to do their jobs because they have to deal with the protesters, despite protesting and kutaka kusema haki yako, you know, right of public assembly being in the constitution. But really, it doesn't justify deaths during the maandamanos.
Right, and that has been the voice of different human rights groups, whether it's Haki Africa, whether it's the religious leaders themselves, whether it's IMLU, whether it's the Law Society of Kenya. And of course, the deafening silence on the side of government to acknowledge really how many people have died, but also giving details of what exactly led to that death. Because when you speak to different people, that may be private to what has been happening, then you hear of these several deaths, especially recently when our crew was visiting the city mortuary and finding relatives who are stranded on how to bury their kin. So you get a feeling that the numbers may actually be more than what we've been reporting. But now without official sources, it becomes very difficult, because even when you hear some organizations, for instance, the Amnesty International, they were reporting the numbers they were able to track. When you hear the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights that were across the country yesterday, lots of emotion, looking at the images of even children that had been injured, talking of different persons that are now still in hospital having to nurse injuries. And it gets to you that really, whatever the circumstances that they were, because there are people that have said these are not innocent demonstrators that were shot. That's what the word has been. But they were shot.
Yes.
By who?
Yeah.
The government has been saying, releasing statements regularly on the status of guns that may be in the wrong hands at the moment. There has been investigations, there have been raids at different homes. A statement released by Professor Kindiki, I think it was on Monday, if I'm not mistaken? No, it was actually Friday last week. Him saying that there are some 23 guns that are in the hands of people that are in homes in the area of Karen. So a lot of information coming in. But really, the level of accountability, we are not seeing it. So that you say, yes, investigations are being done. This is the number of people that are being killed. This is the identity of the bullets that have been retrieved from these bodies. These are the suspects that may have killed these people. These are the guns that are suspected of being the source of these bullets. So on that front, I think there's still so many questions, and only answers are going to really come all this.
And what we have been told is the number of police officers who have been injured and the number of police stations that have been destroyed. But really, the lack of communication is one thing. But one thing that has been clear from the beginning is the defense of the police. Maybe we should listen to President Ruto speaking today in Lamu, defending the police.
Wale watu wanajaribu kuchochea ati askari wetu ati wamefanya makosa kulinda haki, kutetea haki. Tuko na askari wengi zaidi ya 300. Wengi wako hospitalini, wameumizwa, wamepigwa mawe, wameumizwa na hata marisasi, wakichunga mali na maisha ya wananchi wa Kenya kutoka wakora na wahuni na watu ambao wanataka kuharibu usalama na kuharibu mali na kupoteza maisha ya Wakenya.
Linus, is this a rubber stamp, a tick of continue what you're doing?
Well, it's a step by the head of state to defend arms of his government. Police are actually considered part of the executive arm of government. And it will be natural to have the president defending the police action. What will not be possible in moments like this is the absence of recognition of the number of deaths that have happened through police shootings. I don't think the government is doing well in keeping that silence going. The silence maybe looks strategic, but it doesn't sound right eventually. And there's something we've noticed from 2007 coming this way. And that is the lack of appreciation in a situation of conflict, that the government is still the biggest person in the room, yeah. Bigger than the opposition, bigger than the bank thieves, bigger than robbers, bigger than looters. The government is still the bigger person in the room. I think we are losing that. What we've seen from 2007 to 2013, 2017, and now 2022 is this kind of ownership of the armed services, the police service, almost in a political way by the governing party. When the president says, askari wetu, so it's wetu to the exclusion of who? Askari wetu should be askari for everybody. In fact, the slogan for the Kenya police is utumishi kwa wote. And that includes even wrongdoers. That includes even opposition supporters. So there is a problem, and this we've seen even through the reports by the Waki report, for example, that went deep into how the armed services were deployed in political conflict. We are falling in the same trap where the police is seen as an armed wing of the ruling party. The police is seen more as a militia of the political outfit that is in office. We are yet to see a police service that is able to detach itself from the party in power. And that is a big problem. That is a big problem because a policeman should inspire the confidence of all persons that are in a particular conflict. And the main problem has been, and I think this has been expounded a lot in the conversations that have been held here, the main problem has been the implementation of the provisions of the law that tells the police how to operate. Mm-hmm. For example, we spoke about, I think, Article 245 that sets the independence of command of the police service. Do we see that independence in practice? We don't. Let's take note, for example. When was the last time we saw Japhet Koome, the Inspector General of the Police? He's nowhere to be seen. Everybody is speaking about the police. Politicians are all talking about the police. But the boss, the person who is supposed to actually, the spokesman of the police, and that is the Inspector General of Police, has said nothing. And this we should really consider part of one of those deep issues that Kenya needs to resolve in order to reach that mature political stage. First of all, our institutions should be trusted by all, regardless of their political beliefs. You should not see a policeman and think maybe he's a UDA card-carrying member. Mm-hmm. No, you should see the policeman and see that a coat of arms that is shared by all, regardless which way you voted. The police really, really need a lot of work in terms of transitioning to the constitutional order as envisioned by the Constitution of Kenya 2010.
John and Caleb, I'll come to you, Caleb. Has the policeman of the 1990s changed, or is it the same? I ask because you covered the first Sabasaba meeting in 1990. Is it the same policeman over 30 years later?
Actually, they haven't changed. Unfortunately, the training at Kiganjo is still steeped in colonialism. You are trained to clean your boots, to run, do push-ups, and then you are told that the 1 inch is actually your enemy. They do what they call the 5BX, 5 basic exercises. Then you are deployed with a G3 rifle. So systematically, the police have become, like you said, a wing of the ruling party. In the police force, we have killer squads that are used by politicians to settle scores, to commit assassinations. People like Ouka and Jayem were killed by senior police officers. Of course. They didn't die. It was somebody coming in from Japan to kill them. So that training must change. The police are only used by the rich and the powerful, and the sitting president and ruling party. We had the dreaded special branch. Some of us were tormented for years because wherever you went, they would follow you, and the people disappeared. What has been happening in the past few years of bodies appearing in rivers is just a recurrence of the 60s and 70s, where Gashia and Atemi disappear, and then their bodies are found, if they are lucky.
Yes.
But many disappeared for forever. So it's a serious problem. Willie Mutunga, when he was the chair of the Kenya Human Rights Commission, tried in helping reshape the conversation from a police force to a police service. But what you do, we just simply change the uniform. We did not change the basic training.
Yes.
We don't change the philosophy.
The name actually changed to the service. Forced to National Police Service.
National Police Service.
Service to who? And service to who?
Then you see, our president has forgotten that when he came in, he had a big quarrel with Mheshimiwa Kinoti, who was the DCI boss. Yes. Because there was a squad there that was being used to harass the Gachagwas and those who are seen to be. So it's a question of changing musical chairs.
Yeah.
There is Gashie in power, tomorrow is Atemi in power. So I torment you, tomorrow you torment me. And we can't run a country that way. When I was the president of Calcutta Federation a few years ago, I went into talks with the police. We even had actually a fast training program in Kiganjo, to train police on how to disarm protesters without using violence. Don't need a gun. If you are trained in martial arts, let's say karate and aikido, a simple thing of just a place you touch in the body and you subdue the fellow, you don't hurt them at all. So why do we need guns? You don't need them at all. You just need to be retrained completely, and we shift away from physical violence. Physical violence,
John? Yeah, indeed, I would say this. In the 1970s, the police, early 70s and early 80s, I mean, most of the suspects in the JM, the Tom Mboya, the Pio Gama Pinto, all right, Robert Uko, all right, there was always an unsettled issue about the police or rogue police or secret police unit. And indeed, we've always had this happening over and over again. But I think, Caleb, you'd remember in the 1990s, the Saba Saba, isn't it?
Yeah.
The Saba Saba, the riots in Kamukunji. Indeed, the violence meted out on journalists themselves. Indeed, journalists have been the major recipient of police violence. But there is something perhaps we are failing to appreciate, that the police is part of the state's means of violence. In terms of structural violence, the state monopolizes that. And what the best example and outcome of state violence and control is what is happening in Sudan now, is what is happening in Somalia now, is what is happening in Ethiopia at the moment, and is what is happening to a lesser extent in DRC, in Rwanda, and in Mozambique at the moment.
Yes.
So we need to rein in, state excessive use of force under the guise of seeking political advantage. Is the Kenyan police being used? Certainly. Is this government the only guilty one? No. Is it more likely to do that? That's a question.
Okay. Gituku, the more things change, the more they remain the same, right?
Right. And I have a question for Caleb, because the government and the Deputy President, in fact, on Friday last week, said that you cannot go to the streets destroying property and expect police to come kiss you. So when demonstrators are labeled or are seen to be violent and throwing stones, whatever it is they're throwing at the police, how are the police supposed to behave, especially when they feel their lives are threatened?
Now, unfortunately, in Kenya, we have that tragic history. We have a police force that has been criminalized over time. We have new recruits that are trying to be good. Then we've got opposition or protesters that infiltrate peaceful demos to commit criminal offenses. We actually have genuine policemen that have been killed in the line of duty. It's a horrible mix that requires deep thinking and work from both sides. But the tactics they're using the same tactics, Saba Saba, is that famous photo of Orengo and Shikuku and Wanyoike on that van.
Yes.
We were brutalized. Yes. We had our legs broken and people were beaten. Some techniques were using from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. So I think if the police were to change their approach, I said the bigger brother, the bigger force, these guys might change. The guy from Mama Bay, Migori, the cop was talking to protesters across the bridge.
That was Migori.
Yeah, those are techniques that can be used.
Yeah.
And there was Inspector Ndenge at the time.
Yes.
That is 2007, a general service officer.
Yes.
In Madare.
Yeah.
Yes.
And engage them as fellow brothers, talk to them, and if they know that you're not going to shoot them, believe in me, you'll have neutralized the criminal element.
Okay, all right. I know we can continue on this for long, but time is not on our side, and there's something I think we need to discuss finally.